In medieval Alpine regions, fresh milk rarely lasted more than a day. Thin mountain air, long distances, and sudden weather shifts made preservation a matter of survival, not preference. When winter sealed valleys behind snow and ice, food had to endure months of isolation. Hard cheese emerged as a quiet but decisive answer, a way to turn fleeting summer milk into a stable source of nourishment that could outlast cold, distance, and time. In the medieval Alpine regions, geography dictated daily life with little room for negotiation. High-altitude terrain limited arable land, making large-scale grain cultivation unreliable and often impossible. Short summers, thin soils, and steep slopes favoured grazing animals over crops, pushing communities toward pastoral economies rather than agriculture. Cows, goats, and sheep could convert wild grasses into milk, but that milk presented an immediate problem. It spoiled quickly. Without artificial cooling, fresh milk could turn sour within hours, especially during the intense activity of summer herding. At the same time, winter isolation was absolute. Snow-closed mountain passes, cutting off trade and preventing outside supplies from reaching remote valleys for months. What was not preserved in summer simply would not exist in winter. In this environment, preservation was not a culinary choice or cultural preference, it was a structural necessity. Milk represented abundance only briefly. If consumed immediately, it provided short-term nourishment but no security. If wasted, it meant lost labour and lost calories. Alpine communities learned that survival depended on converting temporary resources into stable ones. This pressure shaped food practices deeply. Preservation methods emerged not from experimentation alone, but from repeated confrontation with scarcity. Hard cheese was born from this reality, a response to environmental limits that demanded foresight, patience, and restraint, rather than immediacy or excess. Transforming milk into hard cheese fundamentally changed its role in Alpine life. Through heating, curdling, pressing, and aging, large volumes of fresh milk were condensed into a dense, long-lasting food. Moisture removal slowed bacterial growth, while salt and thyme stabilized the product further. What once lasted hours could now endure months, even years, without spoiling. This process did more than preserve calories. It preserved labour. Weeks of milking during the summer season were captured in a form that could be stored, transported, and rationed with care. Hard cheese concentrated fat and protein, delivering high nutritional value in small portions. This efficiency mattered in environments where food variety was limited and physical labour was constant. Each wheel of cheese represented security, a predictable source of energy when fresh food was unavailable. Importantly, the process also synchronized with Alpine life. Cheesemaking could be done collectively during peak milk production, embedding preservation into the social rhythm of herding communities. I am struck by how deliberate this transformation feels. Turning something as fragile as milk into a food that could last through absence and uncertainty suggests a mindset focused on continuity rather than comfort. It reflects a quiet discipline, choosing delay over consumption and stability over immediacy, that feels both practical and deeply human. The Alpine climate played an active role in the success of hard cheese production. Cold temperatures at high elevations slowed bacterial activity, creating conditions that favoured controlled aging rather than rapid spoilage. Unlike warmer lowland regions, Alpine valleys offered a natural refrigeration effect for much of the year. This allowed cheese to mature gradually, developing stability and flavour while remaining safe to consume. Mountain air was typically dry and clean, reducing humidity-related mould growth that could ruin softer dairy products. Natural caves, stone cellars, and earth-covered storage rooms maintained consistent temperatures even as weather shifted above ground. These spaces became essential extensions of the food system, turning the landscape itself into a preservation tool. Cheese aged not in isolation from nature, but in cooperation with it. Altitude also limited insect activity, further protecting stored food from contamination. While the environment was harsh for human comfort, it proved ideal for long-term dairy preservation. Alpine communities learned to read these conditions carefully, adjusting aging times and storage practices to local microclimates. Preservation was not standardized. It was adapted valley by valley. In this way, climate did not merely challenge survival, it actively shaped solutions. Hard cheese succeeded because it aligned with cold, elevation, and seasonal rhythm rather than attempting to overcome them. The food endured because the environment allowed it to. Movement in the medieval Alps was slow, difficult, and often dangerous. Steep paths, narrow passes, and unpredictable weather limited how goods could travel between valleys and into lowland markets. In such conditions, food needed to be durable. Hard cheese met this requirement better than almost any other dairy product. Its firm texture resisted crushing, leakage, and spoilage during long journeys over rough terrain. Compact and dense, cheese could be packed efficiently onto mules or carried by traders without significant loss. Unlike fresh milk or soft cheeses, it did not require immediate consumption or careful handling. This reliability made it suitable for exchange, tribute, and trade across mountain regions. Cheese could move where other foods could not. Transportation was not only economic, it was social. Alpine communities depended on limited exchanges with neighbouring valleys to balance resources. Hard cheese enabled these connections by serving as a portable, trusted commodity. Its consistency reduced risk for both carriers and recipients, strengthening networks in an environment where failure could be costly. In effect, the physical form of hard cheese extended the reach of mountain societies. It allowed isolated producers to participate in broader systems of exchange despite the constraints of geography. Durability transformed food into mobility, and mobility into survival. Life in medieval Alpine regions demanded constant physical effort. Herding animals across steep slopes, cutting hay on narrow ledges, repairing stone shelters, and travelling long distances all required sustained strength. In such conditions, food needed to deliver maximum energy without bulk. Hard cheese fulfilled this role efficiently. Its high fat and protein content provided slow-releasing energy that supported long hours of labour in cold, oxygen-thin environments. Unlike watery foods or thin broths, cheese offered density. Small portions could sustain workers through extended tasks, reducing the need to carry large amounts of food. This mattered especially during seasonal movements between pastures, when weight and space were limited. Cheese could be eaten alone or combined with bread, creating simple but effective meals that balanced limited Alpine diets. Nutritionally, hard cheese compensated for the scarcity of fresh produce in winter months. It helped stabilize calorie intake when vegetables and grains were unavailable or unreliable. More importantly, it offered predictability. Workers knew what they were consuming and what it would provide. This reliability reduced physical risk in an environment where exhaustion could quickly become fatal. Hard cheese did not promise comfort or variety. Instead, it supported endurance. Its value lay in consistency rather than pleasure, making it an ideal companion to a labour-intensive way of life shaped by altitude and necessity. Cheese production in the Alps followed the rhythm of the land. Milk output peaked during summer, when animals grazed on high mountain pastures rich in grasses and herbs. This seasonal abundance was brief but intense. Alpine communities organised their labour to match it, turning fresh milk into hard cheese while conditions allowed. Preservation was timed carefully, aligning human effort with natural cycles rather than resisting them. Cheesemaking became a communal activity during these months. Families and herding groups coordinated milking, heating, pressing, and aging as part of a shared routine. The work was demanding, but it concentrated value into a form that could last long after the pastures were abandoned. When herds descended to lower elevations before winter, the cheese remained behind, quietly storing summer's energy. I find it revealing how closely food production followed time itself. Cheese was not made when convenient, but when nature permitted it. This dependence on seasonal rhythm suggests a deep awareness of limits, an acceptance that survival required patience and synchronization rather than control. Winter in the medieval Alps brought near-total isolation. Heavy snowfall closed mountain passes, cutting off regular trade routes for months at a time. Travel became dangerous or impossible, and relying on imported food was a serious risk. In this context, self-sufficiency was not an ideal. It was a necessity. Hard cheese played a central role in reducing dependence on uncertain winter trade. By preserving large quantities of milk during the summer, Alpine communities created food reserves that could be carefully rationed throughout the cold season. Cheese provided a stable source of nutrition when fresh supplies disappeared and storage vegetables ran low. This reliability allowed households to endure long periods without external support. Importantly, it also reduced vulnerability. Communities that depended heavily on trade were exposed to weather failures, political disruptions, or simple delays. Stored cheese offered insurance against these uncertainties. The ability to rely on one's own preserved food strengthened autonomy at both household and village levels. It allowed planning rather than improvisation, and endurance rather than desperation. In harsh winters, survival often depended less on what could be acquired than on what had already been secured. Hard cheese embodied this principle, turning foresight into resilience. Beyond subsistence, hard cheese became an economic foundation for many Alpine regions. When production exceeded immediate household needs, surplus cheese entered local and regional exchange networks. Its durability and standardized form made it a reliable trading good, accepted across valleys and into lowland towns. Cheese could be stored until markets were accessible, allowing producers to choose when to trade rather than being forced by spoilage. This flexibility gave Alpine communities economic leverage. Cheese could be exchanged for grain, tools, salt, or other goods unavailable at high altitudes. Over time, certain regions developed reputations for quality, turning preservation knowledge into economic identity. What began as a survival strategy evolved into a livelihood. Cheesemaking supported seasonal income and encouraged cooperation among herders, producers and traders. It linked remote mountain economies to broader systems without requiring constant access. In this way, food preservation shaped not only diets, but social and economic structures. Hard cheese became more than nourishment. It became value stored in edible form, carrying labour, skill and trust across time and distance. In the medieval Alpine world, hard cheese functioned as more than nourishment. It was a deliberate strategy for managing risk. By converting perishable milk into a stable product, communities reduced food waste and protected themselves against seasonal uncertainty. Every wheel of cheese represented planning, an acknowledgement that abundance was temporary and absence inevitable. Cheese stabilized diets across long winters when fresh food was scarce. It allowed households to calculate portions, stretch reserves, and maintain consistent nutrition despite harsh conditions. This predictability mattered deeply. Hunger in the Alps was rarely sudden. It crept in when preparation failed. Hard cheese slowed that process, buying time and preserving strength. Importantly, preservation shifted mindset. Rather than consuming everything immediately, people learned to defer gratification in favor of continuity. This approach reduced panic during shortages and reinforced collective discipline. Cheese embodied foresight made tangible. In this sense, hard cheese was a form of quiet governance. It organized labor, shaped seasonal routines, and enforced restraint without coercion. Preservation became a shared understanding rather than an imposed rule. Survival was not left to chance. It was designed into daily practice. Food, here, was not reactive. It was anticipatory. Hard cheese transformed milk into security. Through preservation, Alpine communities extended the usefulness of summer abundance far into winter scarcity. This was not about excess or indulgence, but about alignment with climate, geography, and time. Food choices reflected environmental limits, and adaptation mattered more than volume. What stands out is how survival depended on restraint. Instead of consuming everything at once, people planned for absence. They accepted that nature set boundaries and worked within them. In doing so, they built resilience not through accumulation, but through understanding. I am struck by how much wisdom lies in this patience. The decision to preserve rather than indulge suggests a long view of life, one that values continuity over comfort. It feels especially relevant today, when abundance often encourages short-term thinking. This history reminds us that sustainable food systems emerge from local knowledge. By respecting climate, seasonality, and geography, medieval Alpine societies created stability under pressure. Their success was not rooted in having more, but in choosing what fit. That lesson remains essential in modern discussions of food security and resilience.